This is just a little tutorial video going through the general daily maintenance and what to look for in an Edgebander, specifically the Edgebanders we sell, but this is kind of universal to most Edgebanders. So most importantly anyways, these are very fine moving machines. There's lots of moving parts in them, there's lots of points of contact, there's lots of pneumatics and electronics in it. So number one is it's very important that at the start of every day or even in between jobs that the inside of the machine and all the parts that touch any panels are blown down and make sure they have no glue on them. Alright, so that starts at the little shoe that's in front of the roller, the glue roller. The little piece just after the glue roller that has to be clean. The pressure wheels that then pressurize the edge tape onto the panel, they have to be clean. Make sure there's no glue built up on these because that can impact how well the edge tape sticks. The guide wheels then that follow the panel for the end trimming, they have to have no glue and shavings on them because obviously that will impact it. The in and out, which in this case, well not on this one, on these parts here they have little bearings here, and these little bearings will follow the panel, so you've got to make sure that they don't have any glue or residue on them. Same with this guide wheel here, same for all the guide wheels along the way. Very important, very important. Okay, so let me think now. So when doing a general check over the Edgebander to try and see if it's working correctly, well, the number one thing that you have to look for is that the edge tape is level with the track, as level as possible. You can do that by eyeing along the table for the edge tape along the track. Okay. The next important thing to know is this little panel here that pushes against the tape. This wheel here just puts a bit of pressure in that direction. It has to be snug, not overly tight, you know, snug, so the edge tape can freely move. There's then a little bearing that sits down above the edge tape, and that's meant to be about 1/2 mil away, just to keep the edge tape down at the right level. Not only that, there's another little bar here. This pushes down, keeps the edge tape level again, right? So between that bearing and this bar here, it keeps the edge tape at the correct level for the table. Hence, only this table has to be kind of close, not perfect. These ones here will do it after, right? So when testing out, you just only turn on the glue and only turn on the end trimmers, just for testing purposes. The buffers, the fine trimmers and the rough trimmers you can turn off. And what you can do as well, because the scrapers will be touching the panel, you can pull them out and jam a piece of timber down there just to keep it out and away from the board. So from the starting point, run the panel through and let it trim. When it gets out the far end, just check that the overhang of the tape on the top and the bottom of the panel is even. If it's not even, then you have a problem with the table here, this bearing or that laddie book there. Okay, you got to check for that. While you're also there, check that there is enough glue and not too much glue between the edge tape and the panel, so you can actually get a chisel or a knife, take off the edge tape, have a look along, make sure there's enough in there. Ideally you want to have just enough, right? So it has to have full coverage, and then as it gets pressed onto the panel with them rollers, it has to be slightly just squeezing out, ever so slightly, right? This wheel here, which has very clear instructions as to what way to go, can be used to put more or less glue on. This here is something that we'll have to have a look at every month or whatever. Different temperatures outside, different quantities of glue, different types of glue etc., etc., will have an effect on how much glue actually goes onto the panel. So that is something to watch, okay? The next thing that you will check from that one test is how close or how far away these saw blades are from the panel. Right? You'll often find over time that maybe there's too much overhang, or there's worse, not enough overhang, it's cutting into the panel. If you're doing drawer fronts that are edged all around, that's a pain, especially if it's coloured edge tape. So there is adjustment, and it's very simple. So what we want to do on these, this nut here, we want to turn this nut, right? And as this nut turns, we want to make sure that these two nuts that are locked together are not moving. They're staying stationary, okay? And the fact that there's two washers here shows us that that's how it should work. This is the only nut that moves, right? That nut is connected to this shaft, basically. It pushes it in and out. This shaft is connected to the motor and pushes it in and out. You can make sure you can, how do you say, you can do a little test, you'll find out very quick once you turn it which direction it's supposed to go, whether you want to put more or less of a cut on the edge tape. Now, just know it's vitally important that only this one moves. These cannot move. If they're all moving, there's actually no movement going on. You're actually just moving the shafts, and that's it, right? I know on this particular Edgebander, this one is good. I just need to put a 17 spanner here. It works fine. That's cool. But I know that the one here is a little bit tighter. So what I have to do is I have to put a 13 on the lock nuts, just to make sure that they don't move. And then I have to slowly like wiggle forward and back in the direction I wanted to go, the 17mm nut, right? So just watch for that on these kind of systems. You can't have them all moving. It has to be just the inside one. Use a spanner to hold the lock nuts stationary while you use the bigger spanner to move the big nut. Okay? Very simple. Very simple. Now, there's also no real need to set it, but oh god, there is pressure gauges here for how fast these things move up and down. Basically, more pressure will mean faster cut. You want it to be going just comfortable. You don't want it to be going too fast, because if you cut too fast, it might rip the edge tape off it. It has to be moving just slowly enough, okay? This Edgebander, they move nicely, so there was no need to go near them. Okay, so once we've tested that this is the right height, the glue amount is correct, and it's trimming right, that's phase one over. We know that the edge tape is going on correctly and being cut on the ends correctly, right? We then have to look at the subsequent processes, okay? So from that point, we will turn on the rough trimmers. On these particular Edgebanders, there is no easy adjustment of the rough unless you start undoing some bolts. However, the purpose of rough trimming is to just, as it says, roughly trim the board, right? So the overhang of the edge tape could be, let's say, 4mm over the top, 4mm over the bottom, give or take. What these will do is they'll trim it down until there is just 1mm on the top or 1mm on the bottom, give or take. It basically lightens the load on the subsequent processes, such that it doesn't wear out the tools, okay? So step one anyway, running through that, just check that it's leaving enough for the next ones. Okay, and then we are on to the fine trimming, right? Fine trimming cutters, okay? So what we want to do with these is we want these to do a nice bit of the round over work, right? But what we want to actually aim for is that the scrapers at the end will do the final round over and almost final finish, with the buffing then doing just that last little tickle just to take the rough edge off it, if any, or any maybe little glue residue that's left, okay? So on this particular machine there is up and down adjustment. I've actually wrote on the machine in what way to turn the knob to get it to work. Now I recommend, now that these are set, that they're not touched unless absolutely necessary, right? Because it's a round over tool, up and down or in and out will work, right? So I know the up and down is set, so in and out is the one we go for on this one, because the in and out has measurements on it. It has measurements on it. So at the moment it's set for 1mm tape. If, for example, put in 0.8, pull this back to 0.8 or near enough, it mightn't be exactly 0.8, but the idea being anyway, a smaller number is less edge tape cut, okay? So, say that again. The up and down is set. Don't touch that. Just use the in and out, right? If you find in the future, maybe 6 months or whatever, a year, that the in and out isn't really working, you might find that it's not putting enough of a round over or too much of a round over on it. That means then you have to adjust the top, the up and down, okay? So what that will do, once you start messing with the up and down here, the in and out, the value with which is your good value here is not going to be 1, because you're going to have to move it in and out to get the fine number, right? So you might find that you set the up and down, and then you figure out the in and out, right? And the in and out that you will use for 0.8, 1mm, and maybe some odd stuff, you know. What you can do anyway, once you find your good area, is you can take off this little cover here. It's already off on this one. Allen key in here, undo that, just turn this and it'll actually change the number here. So when you do in the future move up and down and change this then to find a new normal position for, we'll say 1mm tape, you can then turn this and actually set the number here for 1mm, such that you know that if you go to 0.8 or 1mm tape, you just turn it back to a predetermined number. Okay, so just to reiterate now, when we're setting up this, we want to set it up that it's taken off a good bit of what's left, but it is leaving a noticeable lip, okay, noticeable lip. And then we move on to the scrapers, right? And the controls for these, the up and down and the in and out, is actually the very same as the fine cutters, okay? So same process applies for up and down, in and out. I have these currently set for 1mm. Don't touch the top up and down, unless of course in the future, excuse me, it goes out of whack and you have to, which then these will have to be changed. And again, once they are changed and you find a new home for, we'll say 1mm tape, you can just use the Allen key here to reset these, okay? Now, the strategy with these is to take off the last, let's just say, in terms of the amount of tape cut off versus when it was put on, these want to like take off like 95 to 99% of it, right? You want the panel to be almost perfect, right? You don't want much glue, you hardly want any glue, but I recommend trying to set it such that it leaves the occasional little residue of glue, okay? That means you know that you're not cutting into the melamine, you're not taking off too much. If you get a panel that's been laying around overnight which has swelled and you put it through, it obviously again won't be cutting too much off it, okay? And then that's when we come to the buffers. The buffers are ideally only to be used to bring the colour back into coloured edge tape after it's scraped off, because it'll whiten it. But in this instance we also use it just to do the last little clean up of any little residue of glue that might be left, okay? And with these in a perfect world, they just need to be barely touching the panel, right? It's very important that the processes beforehand are set up right, such that there's just enough glue going on down here that's slightly coming over, and then the scrapers here are taking off nearly all of what's left hanging over, and then the buffers then will just clean up the last little bit, okay? So there is another spare pair of buffers with every machine. These buffers do wear out. As you can see, there's been glue, a bit of glue put on these. They're still fine, need to be changed in a few months. And then any time when these are changed, you need to actively change them, obviously, and put them in, like, where you definitely know that they're nowhere near the panel, right? And then start running a few panels through and slowly use your adjustment to slowly introduce it into the panel. It need only be ever so slightly tickling the panel, right? If you find that you think that you have to push this into the panel more to clean up the glue, that is a bad idea, because what it'll do is it'll wreck the buffer, it'll leave a bad edge, and then it'll start smudging every panel you put through it. You don't want that. You don't want that, okay? Yeah, I think I covered it all. I suppose if anyone has any questions about this, feel free to call me anytime. I'll happily go through it. I do think this video should be a good help for most of people's questions. So yeah, we'll go from there.